I've read the Koran in translation a few times, and I've noticed from the outset, it's not chronological in any way like our Bible. It isn't really even logical or theological. It sort of seems decontextualized.
Very much so. It's essentially
Random.
A series of kind of like sermons, exhortations of various ways, mostly just denunciations of the unbelievers, with various stories of biblical prophets added in that all have an exact parallel to the experience of Muhammad himself. In other words, Muhammad meets with scorn and derision, and he denounces the unbelievers and says they will ultimately be punished in hell and punished in this world as well. And then you read stories of Noah, of Moses, of David and Solomon and so on in the Quran, of Joseph and Jacob, and they all run along the same lines. And it seems clear that what they're trying, what the point always is to say, see, the other prophets went through exactly the same thing, and now you unbelievers are treating Muhammad in the same way, and you're going to receive the same punishment.
What does the Koran have to say about Jesus and Mary?
In the Quran, Jesus is a prophet. He's the last prophet before Muhammad, and he prophesies the coming of Muhammad in the Quran. The Christians are warned numerous times in the Quran that it not only does Allah not have a son, and that Jesus is not the Son of God, but that it is an insult to the transcendent majesty of Allah to say that Jesus has a son, and tantamount to associating partners with Allah in worship, deifying a human being, and thus committing the cardinal sin of shirk, which is essentially polytheism or worshiping others besides Allah. And he is, although there are traces at the same time of Christian theology in that he's characterized as the Word of God, and is, not in the Quran, but in Islamic tradition, identified as sinless and as the prophet who's going to come back at the end of the world, although when he does, he's going to make war against Christianity. In the Quran, he is born of a virgin, and there's a chapter called Mary, chapter 19, which details the virgin birth and even the Annunciation, but without saying that, of course, the child will be holy and the Son of God. And Jesus is, we are also told that he appears before Allah, and Allah asks him, "Did you tell your followers to take yourself and your mother as gods alongside me?" Evidently that was Muhammad's idea of the Trinity, was Allah and Mary and Jesus. And he says, "Oh no, how could I say that when I wasn't authorized to do so?" And we are also told that he does not die on the cross, but it only appeared as if he died on the cross. And
so that somebody was made to look like Jesus by Allah, and he died instead to fool the...
Well, this is a real stolen base, because if what they are saying is true, then we are the apostates.
Oh, quite
we
so.
are traitorous to the true teachings of Jesus, who only prepares the way for this real special guy.
That's quite right.
The protagonist of the story.
In Islamic theology, not only Jesus, but all the prophets of the Old Testament are considered to be Muslim prophets. And Abraham, in chapter 3, verse 67, is specifically identified as a Muslim.
So they've co-opted everything.
We'll see all the prophets and Jesus were Muslims who taught Islam, and then their wicked followers, for reasons of their own personal gain, twisted their teachings to create the false religions of Judaism and Christianity.
And here's a twist. Isn't there a chronological problem with the identification of Mary as Miriam?
Yes, there is.
The sister of Moses?
Yes, in Arabic.
And that actually, there is evidence from natural historiography that refutes that.
Oh, well,
and so the twistedness
clear.
Is on the part of the chronology found in the chapter on Mary.
Well, see, it's a funny thing because...
it seems.
It's not in the chapter... Well, actually, I believe it is there, but it's also in chapter 3, the family of Imran, and that's very important, as I'll explain. In Arabic, the word is the same for Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron, and Mary, the mother of Jesus. It's Maryam. And so Muhammad apparently confused the two. And it's also presented in the Quran that all the prophets are of the same household and are essentially related. And so in the Quran, Mary is twice called sister of Aaron. And Muhammad, there is a hadith, because apparently Christians from very early on were deriding this and saying, "You got this wrong. You're thinking that Jesus is Moses' nephew," when he's much later. And there's a hadith in which Muhammad is approached and asked about this, and he says, no, sister of Aaron is just an expression of respect. and it doesn't mean literal sister of Aaron. But the problem with that is that she's called sister of Aaron in chapter 3 of the Quran, which is entitled The Family of Imran. Imran in the Quran is Moses' father. And so the whole thing is about the family of Moses. And Mary comes in and is called Aaron's sister. It's very clear that that is absolutely what is meant, but it was just caught early on, and this apologetic excuse fashioned to explain it.
In that chapter on Mary, though, what is stated positively about Our Lady?
Well, it's clear that she's very pious and she is holy, and as a matter of fact, she also, along with her son, they are both identified as sinless in Islamic tradition. And she is, the virgin birth is presented quite forthrightly, and she is described with great respect. And so also is Jesus, although he has less to do in the Quran. Nonetheless, he is spoken about quite often and always in glowing terms. As a matter of fact, there's some aspects of Gnostic Gospels in which he speaks from the cradle in the same chapter of Mary, and in which he, when he's a child, fashions clay birds and then claps his hands and they fly away, and so on. And this kind of thing is striking because Muhammad, several times, we're told in the Quran, is challenged to produce a miracle, and he can't. And he just says the Quran itself is the miracle, and that's all they're going to get. And so Jesus, in certain sense, has greater powers than Muhammad, and there are things about him that do not apply to Muhammad, like the second coming, and like the sinlessness and the fact that he is the Word of God and born of a virgin.
But I mean, he presents himself with some fairly divine pretensions. How do they cope with that? How do they strip him of these so-called divine attributes? He claims to be God. Before Abraham was, I am. I mean, how do they
This is the
handle
corruption
that?
of the
Christians
Injil.
invented it.
Yeah,
We hallucinated all this.
We corrupted
we
the
corrupted
sources
it
of our
for
own
venal
religion.
purposes.
The Injil, like the Torah, are both corrupted by Christians and Jews.
Jesus was given a book. In the Quran, the gospel is not considered to be the good news of Jesus Christ, but it is a book that he received from Allah the way Muhammad received the Quran. And then that book, which was a Muslim book that taught Islam, was corrupted by the Christians to create what we call the New Testament.
And they speak of that as the Injil, the gospel.
Yes.
Just like the Jews have the Torah, the law. Both of these have been corrupted.
So we really ought to be grateful to the Muslims because they want to disabuse us of these historical lies.
That's absolutely the standard Islamic view of this.
Which makes it easier, I think, to submit because they're doing us a great favor and liberating us from
Yes, and they
these
make use of
historical
modern biblical
howlers.
criticism. The Jesus seminar kind of thing that says none of these things are historical, or this is and that isn't, and they say, see, this is evidence that your scriptures are corrupted, and so you have to get the full true thing in the Quran itself.